Within a dusty church registry unearthed in 2018 from beneath the wooden floors of Salem's most ancient chapel, officials uncovered proof of more than 200 vanished individuals linked to the Massachusetts witch persecution that official history never acknowledged. The identities carefully catalogued in the confidential journal of Salem's most influential household showed dates of death, land assessments, and disturbing annotations such as purchase finalized next to each casualty. Though historical accounts document 19 formal Salem deaths, this manuscript indicates the actual figure reached 237, with the majority of casualties eliminated from official documentation through calculated record manipulation. Even more alarming, every vanished individual's assets were methodically conveyed to identical 3 individuals: Magistrate Ezekiel Blackwell, Minister Nathaniel Blackwell, and Constable Josiah Blackwell, 3 siblings whose heirs continued to possess more than 40% of Salem's heritage area to this day. The most chilling detail, the concluding notation dated October 1720, bears merely 5 phrases alongside a young lady's identity: Mercy Blackwell, domestic issue settled. Prior to advancing with the narrative of the Blackwell Empire and their dominion of fear, I should mention that this program isn't suitable for all viewers. Only individuals courageous enough to confront history's most sinister realities should proceed viewing. Should you be among the chosen few who pursue these concealed horrors, subscribe immediately and inform me in the responses which region you're tuning in from. These represent the accounts most programs are too frightened to share, and we're merely beginning. Let us journey to colonial Massachusetts, where the origins of this overlooked catastrophe were initially sown. The year 1692 represents not merely a grim period in American chronicles, but the commencement of a plot far more wicked than most academics dare recognize. Salem in 1692 existed as a settlement seized by terror. Positioned within the thick woodlands of Massachusetts Bay Colony, the community of approximately 500 residents adhered to strict Puritan doctrines as defense against both the untamed land encircling them and the suspected wickedness hiding within their society. The village featured a central worship hall, numerous wooden dwellings grouped together, and distant farms distributed across the nearby farmland. Puritan religion controlled all elements of everyday existence, with rigid compliance demanded from every community member. The Blackwell household maintained a status of unmatched power. Their impressive dual-level residence sat directly opposite the worship hall. Its glass panels, an uncommon extravagance, sparkled in the evening sunlight. Magistrate Ezekiel Blackwell, the senior sibling at 46, governed the regional tribunal with steadfast command. His sunken eyes overlooked nothing, and his rulings were regarded as absolute as holy text. Despite his prosperous lifestyle, he dressed in plain dark clothing, preserving the facade of Puritan modesty while secretly accumulating authority. Nathaniel Blackwell, 2 years Ezekiel's junior, proclaimed passionate sermons every Sunday that rendered the assembly quaking. His voice could transition from a murmur to a booming cry that appeared to disturb the meeting hall's very beams. With his thin build and penetrating stare, many thought he could peer straight into an individual's spirit to identify the smallest corruption. Constable Josiah Blackwell, the junior sibling at 41, implemented the regulations his brothers created and interpreted. A muscularly developed individual with a constant scowl, he wielded a unique engraved walking cane that many alleged had fractured more bones than any other instrument in Essex County. United, these 3 individuals managed every facet of administration, religious leadership, and law implementation. However, Salem was transforming. Fresh traders were creating enterprises, generating rivalry for the Blackwell's commercial ventures. Households like the Putnams and Proctors were acquiring power, threatening the siblings' firm control over the settlement. Action was required to preserve their status, and the initial rumors of sorcery offered the ideal chance. The winter of 1691-1692 had proven exceptionally severe. Food supplies diminished, sickness traveled through crowded homes, and conflicts increased as households battled to endure until spring. In Minister Blackwell's residence, his 16-year-old niece Mercy witnessed the mounting tension with silent worry. Ezekiel's daughter, she had been nurtured in her uncle's household following her mother's death during delivery, obtaining an education rare for a young lady of that era. Mercy possessed literacy in both English and some Latin abilities. She utilized maintaining documentation for her uncle's chapel, with her auburn hair consistently properly concealed by her bonnet as Puritan propriety required, and contemplative gray eyes. Mercy navigated Salem like a silent specter, witnessing much while speaking minimally. She faithfully documented christening, weddings, and deaths in the chapel registry, never challenging why her uncle occasionally directed her to create entries in a distinct, smaller volume that he secured in his private desk. During evenings, she frequently overheard her father and uncles conversing in subdued tones in her uncle's office, their voices sometimes escalating in what resembled eager scheming before becoming quiet when anyone drew near. On a harsh February night, as Mercy transported firewood to her uncle's office, she stopped outside the entrance, hearing her father's voice elevated in uncommon excitement. "The Porter widow's property borders the waterway access we require. With her spouse deceased, she never managed it adequately," Ezekiel was stating. "She declined to sell to me on 2 occasions," responded Josiah, his deep voice colored with annoyance. "Perhaps," said Nathaniel, his tone calculated and frigid, "the widow Porter might shortly encounter difficulties of a different character. I've received troubling accounts of peculiar conduct. Periods like these demand alertness against Satan's power." A chill unrelated to the winter freeze traveled down Mercy's backbone as her uncle's chuckling blended together. 2 weeks afterward, when the initial witchcraft accusations burst forth in Salem Village, Mercy couldn't avoid recalling that discussion and questioning the timing. The accusations proliferated like flames through Salem's dry fears. Young females writhing on the worship hall floor, claiming invisible tortures. Respectable wives suddenly identified as Satan's companions. Farmers charged with cursing harvests and destroying animals. And positioned at the center stood the Blackwell siblings, Ezekiel gravely overseeing rushed trials, Nathaniel supplying religious justification for the events, and Josiah removing the accused from their dwellings in the middle of the night. What commenced with 3 accused sorceresses in February expanded to dozens by May. The prison overflowed with terrified captives awaiting judgment. The settlement split as neighbor charged neighbor, old resentments suddenly reinterpreted as proof of evil power. Throughout everything, Mercy dutifully documented names in her uncle's confidential registry, never questioning why numerous accused owned assets that her father had previously shown interest in obtaining. When the widow Porter was detained on a stormy April evening, Mercy finally started comprehending the horrible sequence developing before her. The widow's cries resonated through the village as Josiah and his officers pulled her from her dwelling. The following morning, Mercy overheard her father and uncles discussing how her assets would require management during her confinement. Within 7 days, the widow's prime waterfront property had been acquired by Ezekiel at a portion of its worth, supposedly to finance her maintenance while imprisoned. As spring became summer, the deaths commenced. The first to perish was Bridget Bishop, executed on June 10th at what would subsequently be named Gallows Hill. Mercy observed from afar as the woman's body hung from the limb of a massive oak, her uncle's voice ascending in prayer for the condemned witch's soul. That evening, unable to rest, Mercy entered her uncle's office and with shaking hands opened a secured drawer. Using a key she had secretly duplicated weeks before, in the faint light of a lone candle, she opened the leather-bound registry and started reading. What she discovered froze her blood. The volume contained not only the identities of the accused and their alleged crimes, but comprehensive inventories of their assets, obligations, and holdings. Beside each record, annotations revealed how these possessions had been or would be obtained by the Blackwell siblings at drastically reduced costs. Most troubling were the identities, dozens of them that Mercy had never heard mentioned in the public proceedings. Names accompanied by execution dates and the simple phrase matter concluded or purchase finalized. If her reading was accurate, her father and uncles had not only manipulated the witch hysteria for monetary benefit, but had performed secret deaths of individuals who were never formally accused, their vanishings attributed to escape or community abandonment. The formal tally of witch trial casualties, which would ultimately total 19 in the public documentation, was overshadowed by the actual number documented in this concealed registry. Just when we believed we'd witnessed the extent of human brutality, the horror in Salem deepens. If this account is sending shivers down your spine, share this video with a companion who appreciates dark historical enigmas. Press that like button to support our pursuit of truth. And remember to subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's uncover together what occurs next as Mercy Blackwell's reality crumbles around her. The summer of 1692 provided no respite to Salem. As the humid atmosphere lingered heavily over the community, the odor of terror and doubt was even more dense. Proceedings continued at a desperate speed. with Magistrate Ezekiel Blackwell overseeing hearings that seldom lasted beyond an hour before guilty decisions were declared. The accused faced a straightforward option: admit guilt and involve others, or maintain innocence and confront death. Mercy observed with increasing terror as additional names filled the pages of her uncle's secret registry. The sequence became undeniable: those who possessed valuable assets or had challenged Blackwell. Family concerns were excessively targeted. Even more troubling were the private interrogations performed in the Blackwell home basement, where Constable Josiah used techniques to obtain admissions that left prisoners with fractured fingers, displaced joints, and occasionally far worse. On a particularly oppressive July evening, Mercy was instructed to deliver refreshments to her father and uncles in the basement. Descending the narrow steps, the sharp scent of copper and perspiration attacked her senses before she could observe what awaited her. In the dim lantern illumination, she found Goodman Thomas Putnam, a wealthy farmer who had refused to sell his mill to Ezekiel, secured to a chair, his face nearly unidentifiable from the assault he had suffered, his fingers twisted at unnatural positions where they had been systematically fractured. Mercy, perfectly timed," her father said casually, accepting the tray from her trembling hands. "Goodman Putnam has just recalled witnessing Goody Proctor communicating with the devil. Isn't that fortunate?" Putnam's eyes, swollen nearly closed, found Mercy's across the room. "They forced me to speak it," he whispered. "God pardon me. They forced me to speak it." Constable Josiah's walking cane struck across Putnam's jaw with nauseating impact. "The devil compels you to say many things, Putnam, but now you speak God's truth, do you not?" Mercy escaped upstairs, her heart beating against her ribs like a caged bird. That evening, unable to sleep, she entered her uncle's office once more and created careful duplicates of several pages from the secret registry, concealing them beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom. Whatever occurred, someone required knowledge of the truth regarding what the Blackwell siblings had accomplished and continued accomplishing. As August arrived, a disturbing new development surfaced. Several accused witches had succeeded in escaping from the Salem prison, reportedly fleeing into the wilderness rather than face judgment. At least that was the official version spread by Constable Josiah. But Mercy, who continued secretly accessing her uncle's records, discovered different information in the registry. Names of the escaped prisoners appeared with notations, like questioned privately and disposed of swamp burial. One entry particularly chilled her: Rachel, nurse resistant to questioning, eliminated quietly. Property transferred successfully. Family informed of escape to Rhode Island. The understanding struck Mercy with the power of a physical impact. Her uncles and father were not merely manipulating the proceedings for financial benefit, they were murdering those who resisted their plans and disposing of the remains in secret. The official witch trial executions were only the public aspect of a much larger, more sinister operation. Determined to collect evidence, Mercy began taking calculated risks. She volunteered to bring food to the prisoners in the Salem jail, smuggling in small pieces of paper and charcoal so they could write accounts of their treatment. She quietly approached relatives of the escaped prisoners, asking innocent-seeming questions about whether they had received any communication from their missing loved ones. Most tellingly, she began creating her own registry, documenting the expanding web of properties obtained by her family through the proceedings. By September, the Blackwell siblings had accumulated considerable holdings throughout Essex County. Magistrate Ezekiel now possessed 3 mills, extensive farmland, and several commercial structures in Salem town. Minister Nathaniel had obtained 2 rival churches, properties, and the land surrounding them. Constable Josiah controlled much of the riverside property, giving him effective command over shipping access. Their wealth had increased exponentially in just 7 months, but resistance was growing. Cotton Mather, an influential minister from Boston, had written expressing concerns about the evidence being accepted in the Salem proceedings. Several prominent citizens had begun questioning the trials, particularly after respected community members like Rebecca Nurse and John Proctor were executed despite character testimonies in their favor. Sensing the changing tide, the Blackwell siblings accelerated their efforts. The secret registry now included a list of priority acquisitions, with names of property owners yet to be accused. Among them were some of the wealthiest and most influential families in the colonial families whose downfall would cement Blackwell control over the region for generations. On a rain-soaked evening in late September, as Mercy was adding to her collection of evidence, a floorboard creaked behind her. Turning with a start, she found her cousin William, Constable Josiah's son, standing in the doorway of her bedroom, his eyes fixed on the documents spread across her bed. I knew someone was accessing Father's study, he said quietly. I never imagined it would be you, Mercy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then William stepped forward, closing the door behind him. They'll kill you if they discover this, he whispered, gesturing to her notes. Mercy straightened her back, preparing for the worst. Will you tell them? William hesitated, then shook his head slowly. No, because what they're doing is wrong. I've known it for months, but I was too afraid to speak. Sat heavily on the edge of her bed. Last week I followed my father and 2 of his deputies into the woods north of town. They were dragging something wrapped in canvas. I watched them, ... His voice broke. I watched them bury Goodwife Foster in an unmarked grave. She didn't escape. To Rhode Island, as they claimed. Mercy felt a surge of hope at finding an unexpected ally, but it was quickly tempered by fear. We need proof that others will believe. My word against my father's, or yours against your father's, won't be enough. There's a meeting tomorrow night, William said after a long pause. All 3 of them in Uncle Ezekiel's study. They're planning something big, something they're calling the final acquisition phase. If we could somehow hear what they're planning, ... The following night, Mercy and William concealed themselves in the small storage space adjacent to Magistrate Ezekiel's study, a forgotten closet accessible through a narrow panel they had carefully loosened earlier that day. Through the thin wall, they could hear the Blackwell siblings clearly as they gathered around the judge's desk. The timing must be perfect, Ezekiel was saying, his quill scratching across parchment as he spoke. When Governor Phipps returns from Boston next month, these trials may be restricted. We must secure the remaining properties before then. The list is ambitious, Nathaniel observed. 17 families in 3 weeks. Even with our efficient methods, that presents challenges. We'll accelerate the private examinations, Josiah replied, his voice cold and businesslike. Those who won't confess and implicate others need not reach the public gallows. The swamp has room enough. What of the Corwin estate? Ezekiel asked. That's the prize that will establish our shipping monopoly, Josiah said with grim satisfaction. I've already planted evidence at Corwin's Homer poppet with pins hidden beneath the floorboards of his kitchen. We'll discover it tomorrow during a search. By week's end, his properties will be ours. As the siblings continued detailing their plans, Mercy and William exchanged horrified glances in the darkness of their hiding place. The scale of the conspiracy was even greater than they had imagined, not isolated acquisitions, but a systematic plan to seize control of the entire region's commerce and governance. When the meeting concluded, the cousins slipped away to the safety of the stable, where the stamping of horses would mask their whispers. We need to get this information to Governor Phipps directly, William insisted. My father has men watching all the roads, but I know trails through the forest. I could reach Boston in 2 days if I leave tonight. Mercy shook her head. They'd noticed your absence immediately. I should go. They pay less attention to my comings and goings. It's too dangerous for you to travel alone. More dangerous to remain, Mercy countered. Tomorrow they plan to search the Corwin home for that planted evidence. What if they decide to search our rooms as well? They'd find everything. After heated debate, they reached a compromise. William would create a diversion the following evening, something that would draw attention to the North Road while Mercy slipped away south toward Boston with their evidence. She would take her documentation, including copied pages from the secret registry, directly to Governor Phipps. The next day passed in excruciating slowness as Mercy made careful preparations, concealing documents in the lining of her cloak and securing a small packet of food. As dusk approached, William departed on his errand, promising to start a small fire in an abandoned barn north of town, enough to draw attention but not endanger anyone. Mercy waited for the alarm to sound, her small travel sack hidden beneath her bed. But as the church bell began to toll, signaling an emergency, her bedroom door burst open. Constable Josiah stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 deputies, his face twisted in cold fury. Mercy Blackwell, he intoned formally, you are hereby charged with witchcraft and conspiracy against godly authority. Behind him appeared her father and uncle, their expressions unreadable. Search her room, Ezekiel ordered. The devil leaves evidence of his influence. With practiced efficiency, the deputies tore apart her small chamber, quickly discovering her hidden documents and the travel sack. Josiah examined the papers, his face darkening with each page he reviewed. It seems my niece has been quite busy, he said, handing the documents to his siblings, recording her meetings with the Dark One, planning to spread lies about godly men. How did you know? Mercy whispered, her voice barely audible. Ezekiel stepped forward, his cold eyes fixing on hers. William has always been a loyal son. Did you truly believe he would betray his family for a foolish girl's fantasy? The betrayal struck Mercy like a physical blow. She had trusted her cousin completely, never imagining he would lead her into a trap. Take her to the special holding room, Nathaniel instructed. We'll begin her examination immediately. By morning, I expect, she'll be eager to confess her sins and name her accomplices. As the deputies dragged her from the room, Mercy caught a glimpse of William standing in the shadows of the hallway, his face expressionless. Only the slight trembling of his hands betrayed any emotion as he watched his cousin being taken away. Special holding room was in fact the root cellar beneath the meeting house, a damp, windowless space where the Blackwells conducted their most private interrogations. As Mercy was roughly secured to a chair, she realized with growing horror that her fate would likely never be recorded in the official proceedings of the Salem trials. Like so many others, she would simply disappear, another victim of her family's ruthless ambition. Ezekiel entered alone, closing the heavy door behind him. In his hands, he carried the leather-bound registry that had started Mercy's investigation. I had such hopes for you, he said quietly, placing the book on a small table. Intelligence and obedience, a rare combination. You could have been very useful to our family's future. How many? Mercy asked, finding her courage. How many innocent people have you murdered for their property? Ezekiel shrugged as if the question held little importance. People die in times of crisis and publicly, as examples. Others more discreetly when public executions might raise uncomfortable questions. He opened the registry to its final pages. The official record will show 19 executions when this business concludes. The actual number ... double quotes. He smiled thinly. Let's just say the Blackwell legacy will be secure for generations. You won't get away with this, Mercy insisted, though her voice wavered. Governor Phipps will investigate. Others are already questioning the trials. By the time any investigation occurs, evidence will be scarce and witnesses scarcer still. Ezekiel picked up a quill and dipped it in ink. Now I have a final entry to make in this book. The question is, what shall I write beside your name, daughter? The tension in that root cellar would mark the turning point in Salem's darkest chapter. Though few would ever know the full truth of what transpired there. As events in Salem reached their climax in October 1692, a remarkable confluence of circumstances altered the course of history. Governor William Phipps, returning early from Boston, issued a proclamation forbidding further arrests based on spectral evidence. Though Mercy's whereabouts remained unrecorded in any official document from the period, a mysterious letter reached the governor's office just before his declaration, a letter containing detailed evidence of judicial misconduct and property seizures connected to the trials. The turning point came on October 29, 1692. When the Blackwell siblings' private registry was discovered by colonial officials during an unannounced inspection of court records. The siblings disappeared that same night, along with several deputies loyal to Constable Josiah. Rumors spread that they had fled to Virginia or perhaps the Caribbean, taking substantial wealth with them. For decades, the full extent of the Blackwell's crimes remained hidden. The colony, eager to move beyond the shame of the witch trials, focused on the 19 official victims rather than investigating disappearances that might reveal a more extensive conspiracy. Families of the missing were left to wonder what had truly happened to their loved ones, many accepting the official explanation that their relatives had fled the colony in fear. It wasn't until 1720, nearly 30 years after the trials, that a startling discovery brought the Blackwell legacy back into focus. Workers renovating the old Salem meeting house uncovered a hidden chamber beneath the main floor, room whose walls were scratched with dozens of names and dates. Forensic examination of the site revealed evidence of extensive bloodstains and multiple shallow graves nearby. Among the items recovered was a small journal, its pages water-damaged but still partially legible. The author, identified only as M.B., had documented the final days of her imprisonment and the unexpected turn of events that had allowed her to escape the fate planned for her. Though many pages were illegible, one passage stood out with chilling clarity. When they came for me that final night, I believed death was certain. But as Uncle Josiah raised his knife, a commotion above stayed his hand. William appeared at the cellar door not as betrayer but as savior, having alerted the governor's men to our location. In the chaos that followed, I witnessed what I can only describe as divine justice. My father and uncles, architects of so much suffering, fleeing like common criminals into the darkness. I know they will not stop. Wherever they have gone, their ambition and cruelty will continue. I make this record so that those who come after will know the truth of what happened in Salem, not a supernatural panic, but a calculated scheme of murder and theft disguised as religious zeal. The official records show 19 victims. The true number approaches 237 souls. Their names recorded in the Blackwell registry and on these walls where many breathed their last. I write this in October 1720, having returned to Salem after years in hiding, determined that the truth will not remain buried forever. The journal ends abruptly mid-sentence, its final page stained with what appears to be blood. No record exists of what became of Mercy Blackwell after this entry. Though local legends suggest she may have been the final victim of her family's legacy, perhaps tracked down and silenced by relatives, determined to protect the Blackwell name. The passage of time often buries the darkest secrets, but sometimes the truth finds ways to surface, no matter how deeply it was buried. In the centuries since the Blackwell descendants scattered throughout New England, many changing their name to escape the growing rumors of their ancestors' crimes. Property records show that much of Salem's most valuable land remained in Blackwell-connected families until the mid-19th century. The blood-soaked origins of their wealth obscured by time and deliberate omission from historical accounts. Perhaps most disturbing is the recent discovery of letters dating from 1695 to 1730, suggesting that the Blackwell siblings established a new power base in the southern colonies, where they continued their practice of manipulating local justice for financial gain. Reports of disappearances and unexplained property transfers followed their movements like shadows, though no formal charges were ever brought against them. The Salem witch trials remain one of America's most infamous miscarriages of justice, but the traditional narrative captures only the public face of a much darker conspiracy. While scholars debate the exact number of victims and the full extent of the Blackwell's crimes, the evidence points to a systematic campaign of terror and acquisition that far exceeded the official record. This mystery shows us how the most terrifying monsters in history are not supernatural beings, but humans driven by greed and the lust for power. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed, or are there still Blackwell secrets waiting to be discovered? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves historical mysteries. This channel isn't for everyone, only those brave enough to face the darkest truths of our past.